Today on Notsam Wrestling, the Wyatt 6 save Bo Dallas. The Bloodline takes out Kevin Owens. MJF and Will Ospreay may have had the best match in the history of AEW Dynamite, and Rhea Ripley and Dominic Mysterio are back together. Maybe this is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling, in a world where I said last week it feels like we need pro wrestling as an escape more than ever, in a world where it feels as though everything else is turning into pro wrestling. We kind of need pro wrestling as the explanation. Wrestling might be the only thing that allows us to make sense of anything that is going on in the real world. So that's what we're here to talk about. Not the real world, but professional wrestling. And I tell you, on a week where there were no emergency pods leading up to this show, I probably should have done at least 3, because we have a lot to talk about today. We'll start with the Bloodline once again closing SmackDown and once again leaving a body at their feet. Of course, this week it was Kevin Owens left at their feet. Last week it was Randy Orton left at their feet. The week before that it was the wise man himself, Paul Heyman, left at the feet of the Bloodline. We're not going to do any SmackDown spoilers. Of course, they did a double taping on Friday. I guess this week's episode was recorded right after, but no spoilers here. We're just here to talk about what's been on television. So we get to the main event of SmackDown. It's Cody Rhodes and Kevin Owens versus A-Town Down Under. Of course, Cody wanted to go out there by himself, and Nick Aldis said, "What type of general manager would I be if I allowed our WWE champion to put him in a position that's that precarious? You must find a partner, or you will not be able to seek vengeance against Austin Theory and Grayson Waller." So Cody found Kevin Owens, which is real good. When you go from not having a partner, like Braun Strowman didn't have a partner at WrestleMania 34, and they said, you have to have a partner. He chose Little Nicholas from the audience. Cody Rhodes says, I don't need a partner. He says, you have to have a partner. He chooses Kevin Owens. Much worse news. If Cody Rhodes had chosen Little Nicholas or somebody similar to Little Nicholas, probably would have been reason for A-Town Down Under to celebrate. Kevin Owens, not so much. So Cody and Kevin Owens are able to get the W. And as they're celebrating, surprise, surprise, here comes the Bloodline, who actually we had only seen in like a vignette earlier. We hadn't actually seen them in the building per se, I don't think. So the Bloodline come out, and Cody and Kevin Owens as a tandem are able to control Solo Sikoa and the Tongans relatively quickly. Both Tongans, Tonga Loa and Tama Tonga, the right-hand man and the infamous, or is the infamous, it's the infamous Tonga Loa and the right-hand man Tama Tonga, right? So they're taken out real quick. And then Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes together are able to control Solo Sikoa, and that's where, boom, shocker, here comes Jacob Fatu. And Jacob Fatu comes in, and the first thing he does is drag Kevin Owens into the ring and beats him from pillar to post, in the corners, off the corners, every which way you can think of. And Solo Sikoa and the Tongans, who are now firmly in control, are holding Cody Rhodes. They are forcing him to watch another one of his friends get beat down at the hands of the Samoan werewolf. And Cody is trying to escape, but Solo Sikoa is just dropping Samoan headbutts on him as he's watching. Like, he really needs that too. A migraine on top of the humiliation. So, long story short, they end up triple powerbombing or quadruple powerbombing maybe Cody Rhodes through a table. And while Cody Rhodes is helpless in that pile of broken furniture, they put a chair around Kevin Owens' neck and just send Kevin Owens on a sprint into the ring post and, beheading the poor guy. It was quite a scene, and certainly a difference, right? When you see what was done to Kevin Owens, certainly very different than what was done to Cody Rhodes, meaning Cody Rhodes showing up on SmackDown next week to the surprise of no one. Kevin Owens maybe not being on SmackDown for a little bit would be what I would expect. The same way with Randy Orton, maybe not being on SmackDown for a little bit. I don't mean months, but I mean a couple weeks after the beatdown of the Bloodline. So And then, of course, the Ulafala is placed on the neck, around the neck, I should say, of the new tribal chief, Solo Sikoa, by Jacob and the Tongans. I think it's really kind of fun to watch this evolution of Jacob Fatu in a very short period of time. You know, it's been whatever it's been, 6 weeks or so. And he's already evolved into this figure of almost mythic proportions, where the minute he shows up, the minute he starts getting physical, the audience starts going, ooh. Like they know this is different. There's nothing unbelievable about Jacob Fatu taking out the entire babyface roster. And when you want to build a character that's that strong right off the bat, or even not right off the bat, just in general, that's strong enough that the entire roster is in danger, that can be a very delicate thing. Because what you don't want to, you want to make this superstar look strong. What you don't want to do is make the rest of the roster look weak. And I think that formula was actually, as coincidence may have it, perfected by Roman Reigns, in the sense that as many people as there were getting frustrated by the amount of interference finishes that were going down while Roman was on his 3.5-year WWE Championship reign, realistically, what all those interference finishes did was they allowed Roman Reigns to be the most powerful champion in decades. Just as unstoppable a force as I think anybody watching the current product remember seeing. However, it didn't crush the rest of the roster. When the NWO took over WCW in 1997 and became, I guess they started in 96, but 1997 was the NWO's year. And they just became the hottest thing ever. Ultimately, what the downfall of the NWO was, I believe, was it wasn't that it became convoluted. It wasn't that it lasted too long. It wasn't even necessarily the finger poke of doom that could have been survivable. The problem really was that the NWO completely overpowered the entire roster. And not only did they overpower them, they made them look not cool. It was cool to root for NWO. It was not cool to root for WCW. And there were a couple of heroes sprinkled in along the way. Lex Luger beat Hulk Hogan at one point, got a title reign, short. DDP was a hero for a second, but ultimately, nobody was really able to outsmart or overpower the NWO. So when the time came for something new to happen, when the time came for the NWO to kind of be like, okay, it's time for you guys to take a back seat because fans are kind of, ready for a new act, the whole roster had been dismantled. Like in our eyes, we'd watched all these people try to defeat the NWO, and all of them get crushed. So when Roman Reigns loses the title to Cody Rhodes, the danger would be that Cody's now the champion, but save for Cody Rhodes, everybody else on the roster looks less than, because none of them could do what Cody Rhodes could do, and therefore there's no suitable challengers to Cody Rhodes. But the fact that every single finish, especially towards the end, was an interference finish, it more felt like, oh, great, now somebody like LA Knight or Randy Orton or AJ Styles or Drew McIntyre or any of these people, now they can finally get a fair shot at that title that Roman Reigns held hostage, as opposed to, oh, well, they're not that good because they couldn't beat Roman Reigns, and that's because of all those interference finishes. I think we're seeing something similar with Jacob Fatu, where we believe that Jacob Fatu is as powerful and as threatening and as dangerous as he's being portrayed, but it doesn't take away from the rest of the roster because he's not beating them in matches. Jacob Fatu has wrestled once in a real match since showing up in WWE. It's not like every single week they're just feeding him somebody and he's plowing through people, because that's what he would have to do. In order to maintain this aura about him, he'd have to plow through people if he were fighting them. Instead, everything is a sneak attack. Everything it has this kind of caveat where, yeah, he is unstoppable. But that doesn't mean if he was in a match with Kevin Owens, it would go exactly the same way. That doesn't mean if he was in a match with Randy Orton, it would go exactly the same way. When it's a sneak attack, when there's other people involved, when it's just this short flash, Jacob Fatu is unstoppable. And I think that it's been really effective for the short period of time that he's been here. I mean, really effective, and I think that's why he gets the response that he does. But as fascinating as that was, to me, what was more fascinating is the idea that, okay, it's not just a matter of Randy Orton got taken out. Number one, we are effectively building the bloodline to a place where it finally feels like they belong in a SummerSlam main event. Whereas a couple of months ago, people wondered, I don't know about this bloodline. Now it does feel like they are the top heel act on SmackDown. And they've been effective, right? The fact that every SmackDown is now ending with the bloodline standing tall and somebody getting absolutely destroyed, it's effective. I think what's even more fascinating is what story are we telling? What story is being told? As fans, what story are we watching? In the micro sense, we're watching the build-up to Solo Sikoa versus Cody Rhodes, right? But the Bloodline story is not really about Cody Rhodes anymore. And Cody's story is not really about the Bloodline anymore. Cody and Roman Reigns were not these cosmically linked forces. Roman Reigns just happened to be the person carrying the title that Cody wanted. Cody Rhodes had this goal of becoming world champion, and he happened to be looking to be the WWE champion at the same time that Roman was holding the title. And there's a difference between that and like Cody and Seth that are cosmically linked. Roman and Seth to a degree that are cosmically linked. And while yes, at some point, Roman will probably want another crack at Cody because we're due for a rubber match. Roman won the first one. Cody won the second one. All we can do is see who wins the third one. But ultimately, in terms of the bigger story, what happens every time Solo Sikoa is in a ring talking? What are fans chanting? They're not chanting, we want Cody. They're chanting, we want Roman. And that's not because Cody is not the most popular good guy. He is the most popular good guy. But ultimately, everything that is happening with Solo Sikoa and the Tongans and Jacob Fatu and the Bloodline and the Ulafala, it all links directly back to Roman Reigns. And everything that we're seeing on every episode of SmackDown since the one that came right after WrestleMania with the Bloodline, the question has been, what is Roman Reigns going to think? So the question is, and we talked about this last week, are we going to get Roman Reigns returning at SummerSlam? I hope so. I think so. I'd like to see it happen. SummerSlam in the 2020s belongs to Roman Reigns. We made that case last week. Should Roman Reigns return at SummerSlam, which I'd like to think he will, then the story immediately goes to Roman Reigns and the Bloodline. I don't think that the first story that people want to see, based on what has happened since Roman has been gone, when Roman comes back, unless Roman is like, hey, thanks, Solo. This is all exactly what I've been saying. I asked Solo to powerbomb Paul Heyman through a table. I asked Solo to bring on the Tongans and Jacob Fatu. Yeah. I told Solo I wasn't coming back. I just decided to come back later. No. Solo and I are great. Unless Roman Reigns is returning at SummerSlam to be like, hey, Solo, great job while I was gone. And Solo's being like, thanks, Roman. Good to see you back. Now you're the tribal chief again. Then it's about Cody Rhodes. But the likelihood of that happening, I would say, is slim. I don't think that's the direction people would expect it to go in. It doesn't really make a ton of sense. I think more than likely what we're looking at is Solo Sikoa having to answer to Roman Reigns for taking over the Bloodline in Roman's absence. And this idea of the Bloodline Civil War expanding far beyond Roman and Solo versus the Usos, and where Roman falls in with this group that is the new Bloodline, and how Jimmy Uso falls into it, how Jey Uso falls into it, how Paul Heyman falls into it. All this stuff is right there in front of us. So as I'm thinking about that, right, that theoretically, post SummerSlam, the direction that we head in is Solo Sikoa and Roman Reigns. And by the way, that could mean Solo Sikoa wins the WWE Championship. That's not impossible. Jacob Fatu interferes. Solo Sikoa spoils the day. We want the Bloodline to be in the main event. Solo Sikoa wins the title. Now he's got to defend against Roman. Something like that. That's possible. I don't think so. I don't see that as happening. Because I see stories being set up for Roman progressively, right? I see Roman's Bloodline stuff being the priority, which leaves us the WWE Championship as another story to tell. We've got a Roman and Solo story. We've got a WWE Championship story. We've got a World Championship story. We got the Wyatt Six. We have all these things happening at once. If you start combining them, well, now you're just eliminating avenues that you can go down, which wouldn't make sense to me right now because you don't have to. It'd be one thing if you had to. You don't have to. So I think that Roman comes back at SummerSlam. As I said, for me, don't see him saving Cody Rhodes. I don't see him trashing Cody Rhodes. I don't see him attacking Cody Rhodes. But if he makes his appearance at SmackDown, at SummerSlam, I would like for it to be after Cody Rhodes beats Solo Sikoa. And so it's unspoken that he's not there to save Cody. He doesn't have any love for Cody Rhodes. But that's another point because he's got something to say to Solo Sikoa right now. And then we move forward with this Bloodline thing. Now, that begs the question, well, wouldn't Randy Orton and Kevin Owens want to get revenge on the Bloodline? The Bloodline has now taken out both Randy Orton and Kevin Owens, and they forced Cody Rhodes to watch. If Roman Reigns returns at SummerSlam and he's going after the Bloodline, what about Randy Orton and Kevin Owens wanting to go after the Bloodline? And I go, well, that's a great question, right? You've now set up multiple stories that may need an immediate response. So there's two scenarios, really. Maybe we don't go straight into a Bloodline civil war. Maybe Roman does help Cody Rhodes. Maybe we look at a scenario where we've got a super team of Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes, Randy Orton, and Kevin Owens. And that squadron is the quartet that the Bloodline has to deal with. That we've now got Solo, Jacob, and the Tongans having to deal with Roman, Kevin Owens, Randy Orton, and Cody Rhodes. Possible. It's not where I would go. I would instead say it's Roman Reigns and his problem with the Bloodline. That's one story over here. Cody Rhodes comes back from SummerSlam, triumphant victor. And now, as we talked about last week, both Kevin Owens and Randy Orton are back. Did Cody Rhodes visit them in the hospital? Did Cody Rhodes make sure they were okay? They were there for Cody. Was Cody there for them? And that is how we immediately get to Kevin Owens and Randy Orton taking out what happened to them on Cody. And they don't have to turn at the same time. As I said last week, Randy Orton and Kevin Owens come back, and Kevin Owens is the first one to turn. Right? And then when Kevin Owens doesn't beat Cody Rhodes, then Randy Orton turns. So you've got multiple stories for Cody as the Bloodline thing over here is working itself out. But ultimately, these attacks on Randy Orton and Kevin Owens, should Roman Reigns come back? I see it as Randy and Kevin eventually getting revenge on Cody instead of the Bloodline. Because the Bloodline is going to be occupied with everything that came before him. And keep in mind, SummerSlam is August. August, September, October, November, December. We've got another quarter of the year left to go until we get to January, which is Netflix, the road to WrestleMania 41, and who knows, a potential return of the final boss, which would only complicate things even further. Look, whether we get Roman, Kevin Owens, Cody Rhodes, and Randy Orton on a team against the Bloodline, or we get Roman Reigns versus the Bloodline and Kevin Owens and Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes, we're kind of golden. I don't see a bad scenario there. I did see a scenario over on Monday Night Raw, which I was considering emergency podcast worry. It's just sometimes you don't have the hours in the day. On Monday Night Raw, a VHS tape was delivered to the Pat McAfee show on Monday. Power went out. A box is sitting in the middle of the Thunderdome McAfee studio, and it's a VHS tape, clearly from the Wyatt 6, although we don't see the Wyatt 6 in person on that McAfee show. So Pat brings the VHS tape on his private jet to Monday Night Raw that evening. They say they've got it, blah, 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 blah. We get to the tape, and this time on the VHS tape, instead of Uncle Howdy interviewing Bo Dallas, we have Uncle Howdy off camera, but we hear his voice interviewing Eric Rowan. And this was another incredible piece done for this Wyatt 6 story, which is so much more based in reality. It's really interesting because people poo-poo angles like this, saying, oh, the kind of supernatural, wacky, cartoony, those aren't for me. I like the real stuff. Meanwhile, the Wyatt 6 story is far more based in real emotion than any other story on the show. The Wyatt 6 story, the foundation for it, is in the real-life Bray Wyatt documentary. In this interview, Eric Rowan, who, again, we're freely admitting who these people are under these masks. These are not mysteries. These are not ghosts. These are not goblins or zombies. These are former and current WWE superstars under masks inspired by characters that Bray Wyatt showcased on WWE television. This is not something that we're saying outside of kayfabe on a podcast like this. This is something that we're saying on Monday Night Raw very clearly. As Bo Dallas not only did his VHS tapes, but then showed up in Adam Pearce's office, now Eric Rowan is sitting down as Eric Rowan, and he's telling an incredibly emotional story about the last couple years of his life. And not only is it like, and they don't even really get into his career going the way that he thought it was going to go. It's his life. It's the fact that, like, his brother, and he's obviously talking about Mr. Brody Lee, Luke Harper, passes away unexpectedly. And this is a person who, you know, he won the tag team championship with at WrestleMania. This is a person who he entered the WWE with as part of the Wyatt family. This is like extending past the Wyatt family is the Bludgeon Brothers, as I said at WrestleMania. Like somebody who he was so attached to on screen and off screen. And he said just as he's kind of getting to a point where he can process that, he turns around and his other brother is no longer with us. And Bray is passed away. And this group that at one point was a family, one of the most unconventional families in WWE history, but together creating something, the likes of which WWE hadn't seen in a very long time, he's now left completely alone and trying to figure out, well, now who am I? By myself? Am I just this vessel that mourns? What's left for me? And this isn't a wrestling character talking. This is a real life person. And you're watching a guy who spent his whole television career as this, close to 7-foot behemoth with this intimidating long red beard, coming to the ring and tearing people apart, sitting in a chair and being a vulnerable, emotional, real life human being. And allowing that to be the foundation for his character. It makes you wonder, as I was watching this, it's like, okay, they were really successful with both of the Bo Dallas VHS tapes, really successful with the Eric Rowan VHS tape. There are some that believe, well, next we do one with Joe Gacy, then Dexter Lumis, then Nikki Cross. And I don't know. I mean, I think those have to be very different. I don't know that that's the direction that it would go in. Like I said, I didn't think the Ramblin' Rabbit character interviewing Eric Rowan would work because Bo Dallas was always Uncle Howdy, and Uncle Howdy's kind of the ringleader of the group. The Ramblin' Rabbit was not Eric Rowan until right now. By the same token, if we just hear Bo Dallas and Eric Rowan talking about the real life, legitimate tragedies that they've dealt with and how that's the foundation for this character, if we turn around and talk to people who, by the way, may be going through things as well, maybe dealing with the loss of a friend, if not two friends, it's very different than what Eric Rowan and Bo Dallas have experienced on the road here. You know, you certainly can't just do a video where somebody's going, yeah, I thought I was going to get a push and I didn't get a push. It's like, I mean, okay, that's almost as bad, I suppose. It's more like if you're going to do another VHS video, it has to maybe it's Bo Dallas and Eric Rowan and the story of them finding these souls. So the kind of loss is told through them. Maybe it's a single video where all three of the remaining Wyatt Six tell their story. I think there's just, it's got to be a different presentation if you're going to continue on this track, and I think it probably will be. But then the VHS tape wasn't enough as we go forward, and Chad Gable announces that he has done the impossible and he has figured out, he's gotten to the bottom of who Uncle Howdy actually is. Yes. I mean, the earnesty with which he makes this announcement when he goes, it's actually Bo Dallas. Like, it was peak Kurt Angle. I almost wanted Chad Gable to go, it's true. It's true. It was so, and I say that as an extreme compliment because peak Kurt Angle, whether you like Kurt Angle, the wrestling machine, the entertainment side of Kurt Angle, your Olympic hero, three eyes, drink your milk Kurt Angle, was about as great a character as I think there has ever been, in the sense that, like, nobody was doing more entertaining segments than Kurt Angle. And once he got in the ring, he was still a beast that was a credible WWE champion. I think he won it within 11 months of his debut. So the idea that Chad Gable is kind of leaning in that direction to me and succeeding so well is awesome. So he calls out Bo Dallas and everything, and Bo Dallas comes out. And it's Bo Dallas. It's just straight up. There's no Uncle Howdy. There's no music. There's no lights. It's like, it's really interesting. And he's wearing a merch t-shirt. I mean, it's straight up just a guy. It's Bo Dallas. And it's really interesting because they could have put on a little music. They could have put on a little video. But it's almost like what makes it so compelling is the stark opposition to what Uncle Howdy gets. Uncle Howdy and the Wyatt Six not only have this music, they have this unmistakable music. They have hella smoke that comes in. They have visual effects. They have costumes. They have special camera angles that you never see. They have special lighting that you never see. Everything about them is so produced and so unique and so special that the idea that when they just get called out as people and the mask comes off, there's not even music. I mean, there's nothing. It's just a human being approaching. And so we get the payoff that has been coming for weeks and weeks and weeks now with the off-screen antics. And not quite, when I say off-screen, I guess I more mean background conversations that Chad Gable has been having with the Creeds and at one point Ivy Nile. But the Creeds enter the ring with Chad Gable. And Gable and the Creeds start giving Bo Dallas the beating of a lifetime. And they're really beating him down and beating him down. And key here is Bo Dallas is selling all of it. He's not impervious to the pain. He's feeling all the pain, but he's also laughing. He was laughing, but feeling the pain, which I think is key here. Also, the fact that, like, and people are going to think I'm being facetious or maybe even I'm being insulting, but it's quite the opposite. This is about as high a compliment as I could pay somebody. And if you know me, you know this to be true. As Bo Dallas was experiencing the real pain of three Olympic caliber wrestlers beating the brakes off of him, he was laughing. And the laughing that he was doing, I think Bo Dallas is a very underrated performer because we've seen Bo Dallas laugh and smile before, but this is very different than the Bo Leave character. Bo Dallas would laugh and smile, and all you have to do is believe. None of that was there. He was laughing and he was smiling, but there was none of that character in the character that we saw on Monday Night Raw. And as a matter of fact, as he was laughing while he was getting beat down, for the first time in 30 years, for the first time since Matt Bourne donned the face paint, I looked at a performer and went, oh my God, that's the one guy that could pull off Doink the Clown. And I know you think I'm joking, you think I'm being ha-ha over here. No. Because you're probably thinking of Doink and Dink. You're probably thinking of Doink the Clown in 1994. You're probably thinking of Doink the Clown basically post-93 Survivor Series. Babyface Doink. And that's not who I'm talking about. I'm talking about Doink's first year. Basically end of 92 until end of 93. Doink the Clown, if you really look at it, is one of the greatest characters that the WWE ever had. And it's really because of the way Matt Bourne was able to pull it off. In his face, in his mannerisms, in the way he would talk, in the spots that he would use to laugh, and then in the way that he wrestled. The fact that he would get in there and put these amateur holds on you, go for a limb, stretch an ankle, stretch an arm. He had that glee that, like, if you watch Hitman Hart Wrestling with Shadows, and they talked about Stu Hart's glee in stretching his opponents. This was the thing that made this clown smile, was watching other people agonize as he either put them in holes or humiliated them or did whatever. And nobody has been able to pull off, and a few people played Doink after Matt Bourne was out of the WWE, and they stunk to high heaven. They were awful. I haven't seen anybody that I've looked at and gone, that guy would be a great Doink the Clown. Real Doink the Clown. Until I saw Bo Dallas on Raw. But maybe that's just for me. So Bo is laughing, gets beaten more. Laughing, gets beaten more. Laughing, gets beaten more. And all the Easter eggs are still just rippling through this performance. As every time Bo Dallas gets beat down more, he laughs. Then he starts going, yeah. And it's like he's referencing Luke Harper right in front of our eyes in this segment. That's the Luke Harper, yeah. Awesome. As soon as he was doing it, I was like, this is awesome. Every layer of this has content, has material, has reason for being. And then he does the thing. And by the way, as he's getting beaten down, we still don't know what the hell this guy was doing in Adam Pearce's office, okay? And Gable tried to get an answer from Adam Pearce. Adam Pearce wouldn't tell him, but he knew Bo Dallas was in the building that night. We still don't know why Bo Dallas was in Adam Pearce's office, what he said to Adam Pearce. No clue. Maybe Adam Pearce is involved. And he goes, why are you laughing? Why are you laughing? He's beating him. Why are you laughing? And he says the thing. He said the thing. You know I love this quote. I've been talking about it. He says, there you are. Oh, no. Lights go out. Boom, boom, boom. We know what this sound means. The smoke starts to fill the ring. Bo Dallas is still in the corner, beaten, but thrilled. As the Creed brothers and Chad Gable prepare for what's to come. And what's to come is what we see in the aisleway. The Wyatt Six start to approach, and the visuals all of a sudden get incredible. Not only is smoke in the ring, but smoke's on the floor, in the entranceway, in the aisle. The Abby character is carrying the lantern. We see the light behind him. And just as they're about to get in the ring, Huskus is there, everybody's there. Mercy. Just as they're about to get in the ring, Gable powders. And so the Creeds are right behind him. They dip. They're out. They're gone. And then we just see the Wyatt Six, the remaining four members of the Wyatt Six, take Bo Dallas, and Bo Dallas sits there with them in the center of this thing, and we get this beautiful shot moving up, looking at the Wyatt Six, and they're very human, and it's like whether he's wearing the mask or not, this is happening. Everything is all the same. And then the thing goes out and they go to commercial. And all I can think, right? All I can think as I'm watching this segment with the Wyatt Six is who is still doubting them? Who is still doubting this act? And furthermore, who is still, yeah, that's good, but what's nexting them? That thing. Oh, yeah, no, that was good, but I would just want to know what's next. At some point they have to. Eventually they're going to have to. But what's next? And it's like, how many weeks of good content? How many good segments? How much compelling material do you need to have before you can just say, yep, I'm looking forward to seeing him again? Hey, that was awesome. I can't wait until we see what's next, as opposed to going, that was good, but eventually they're going to have to. Oh, that was good, but what's going to happen when they... What is that? I don't understand it at all. Not only is every storyline working for the most part, but the Wyatt Six storyline is gangbusters right now. It's not even like you leave these segments going like, I mean, I guess that was good, but is this even going anywhere? Like, it's going somewhere every single week. There's movement. First week, we get the VHS tape. Second week, we get the second VHS tape, but also Bo Dallas in the office. Third week, we get a third VHS tape, but we also get Chad Gable confronting Adam Pearce. We also get Bo Dallas coming out in human form, getting the beatdown. We also get the Wyatt Six showing up. It develops and moves every single week. So this idea of like, all these questions too are being answered. They're right. These guys, these people, they go, yeah, but are they even going to be able to wrestle without the masks? Eventually, they're going to have to take the masks off, right? Yeah, if you let them cook for a second, they've been taking the masks off. Bo Dallas's mask is all the way off. He'll just put the mask back on. Eric Rowan's mask was off in the VHS tape. This is great. Mask is back on. We know who's under the mask now. We kind of have an idea of why he might be wearing the mask. There's meaning and depth and stuff happening here. That's not just like, I got to have a take, so I don't know, at some point, come on. Well, but what about without the effects? Is it going to work? Bo Dallas came out without even music, and it worked. And yeah, eventually, it's like, oh, they're going to have to sell. You know, they're dressed up as these monsters. They're going to have to sell. All Bo Dallas did was sell. He got the tar knocked out of him. And it didn't look like Gable or... Here's the thing. It didn't look like Gable or the Creeds were weak. It looked like Gable and the Creeds had the ability to completely physically dominate Bo Dallas. However, they're scared of the Wyatt Six. They're scary people. And there's a lot of them. And by the way, there's some big guys in that group, right? It's not like it's just, you know, some like kids that have been training for a week to put masks on. It's freaking Dexter Lumis. It's Eric Rowan. It's Joe Gacy, who's a psycho. Like it's people that have been intimidating in situations far outside of the Wyatt Six. So, I mean, I feel like based on what we saw on Raw, it's even more promising because the fact that like Bo Dallas could take that beating, but still be happy because he knew that whenever he chose, he could call out his family and they would come and avenge him, right? Like, I'll take this beating. I'll take it because every wallop you put on me, it's going to cost you more later. And he knew that. And when he was ready, he called him out. And they realized, like, okay, we can beat up Bo Dallas all we want. There's no stopping this group. So I feel like at this point, unless you don't like it, unless the segments, you've watched the segments and you've been like, I don't like those segments, which if that's your opinion, that's fine. You know what I mean? Like then it's like, okay, well then I get why you're skeptical of the whole thing because you don't like the segments. But if you've liked the segments, what's more to be skeptical about? I mean, if they mess up at some point, I'm not saying they'll never mess up. I'm saying I choose to be optimistic because nothing's been given to me, nothing's been presented to me that makes me feel like there's not something to be optimistic about. Everything's worked well. Everything's been compelling. Everything's been interesting. Everything's been fun. Now, I feel even better about it because it seems like they can lose. Whereas even with The Fiend, The Fiend got to a place, and maybe this was because, as we heard about in the documentary, that different people started trying to direct where this character was going, and maybe it got away from what it was supposed to be at its core. But at a point, The Fiend got to a place where he couldn't lose, which makes it very difficult to work with him. Not him as in Wyndham Rotunda, The Fiend as in this character. If the character can't lose, there's only so much we can do here, right? But the Wyatt Six can lose. The Wyatt Six can get beaten up. The Wyatt, if Eric Rowan gets pinned and loses and is still smiling and still creepy, you can keep it moving. Bo Dallas got the hell beaten out of him. He didn't look weak at the end of the thing, but the Creeds didn't look like they hadn't beaten him up, so felt pretty good to me. But hey, maybe I'm too much of an optimist. The other thing, I was considering an emergency podcast on and just didn't have the time, the certain man hours. I was doing Raw Talk this week. I did SmackDown Lowdown. I did all my other stuff. I did all the Not Sam stuff. I did all the Sirius XM stuff. It was a week. But we may have seen the greatest match in the history of AEW Dynamite. MJF versus Will Ospreay. So when the card comes out for AEW Dynamite episode 250, I'm pretty surprised that they're doing all of these matches, right? Specifically, the two kind of massive matches. One being MJF versus Will Ospreay, the other being Okada versus Swerve. And I go, well, I can't imagine they're going to take the title off Swerve. If they just had him beat Will Ospreay, I can't imagine Okada's going to win the title. But I was having a tough time. These are both matches that I saw for pay-per-views, right? I saw MJF and Will Ospreay being a match for All In the UK. And I saw Okada versus Swerve being a match for All Out a week or two, whenever it is, after All In. Because at All In, we're getting Danielson versus Swerve. And then, maybe you get Okada versus Danielson at All In, and then if he beats Danielson, then you can go back to Swerve versus Okada at All Out. But I was like, probably not. And we got the answer, right? That there was a rare DQ finish for a Dynamite main event in the Okada versus Swerve match, where it just ended up in a big brawl, which wasn't a shock. But what was a shock, I felt, was not only the ending, but basically the entire match of MJF versus Will Ospreay. Again, I wondered, what we're getting to this match very quick in the story. And I can't imagine if Ospreay's not fighting for the world title at All In, how do we get to another Ospreay MJF match at All In? Because what could be a better match for Ospreay unless they're going with a different direction? I don't know. But I wonder if there's going to be a DQ, if there's going to be a run-in, if something's going to happen. And something certainly happened. And what happened was not only maybe the best Dynamite match, but one of the best AEW matches in history. When you look at the best AEW matches in history, and you would go back to Dynamite, you're talking about Thunder Rosa and Britt Baker. You're talking about MJF and Bryan Danielson's Iron Man match. And there's a couple more on there, but this is easily top 5. And after a month or so of sitting on it, we may come to the realization that this is the best one. And I think that the fact that it came out of nowhere and the fact that it just happened is the only thing stopping us from fully making that declaration right now. I think, like a lot of people, at the second commercial break, when they did a commercial break, the match, first of all, immediately, Dynamite starts with MJF's theme song. We're getting right into this opening match. It's like, okay, cool. And they're having their match, go to commercial break, the match continues. When they went to the second commercial break, which was probably like 38, 40 minutes into the match, that's when I was like, oh, we're doing a time limit draw. That makes sense. They'll do a time limit draw, and that'll bring them to All In. Now, in hindsight, I should have known better than they're doing a time limit draw, Because the last thing you want to do with MJF just turning heel is give him that kind of honor of being able to go the distance and maybe, unless he does something wormy to get out of the pin at the last second, it's kind of an honorable way to go out. I should have known better. I am a big fan of MJF going back to being a villain, going back to being a heel. I think right now you look at the landscape and number one, MJF is probably better as a heel, especially because he's not. If he was going to have the Adam Cole match now, then it'd be beautiful. It'd be poetry to be able to go back to All In and have a heel Adam Cole versus a babyface MJF. That would be the best scenario. But if we're not going to have Adam Cole and we're not going to be able to put a bow on that story, then forget it, scrap it. And in that situation, MJF should be a heel, right? Swerve is a babyface. Pretty much, but a babyface. Will Ospreay is beyond a babyface. There are a lot of strong babyfaces in AEW, and having people there, and there's nobody who can be a better heel, I don't think, than MJF. And I definitely don't think that based on what we saw on Wednesday. So one thing I will say is, and this becomes almost a danger for AEW, is that as fans, we just should not take these matches for granted. I think that the quality of wrestling is so high, both in AEW and WWE. I mean, the wrestling hasn't been this good in WWE in a very long time, but AEW kind of prides itself on having those 5-star matches. And I think what we can't do is, it would be a disservice to us as fans and to the performers if we take a match like this for granted. And kind of, because there are so many good matches, forget. I think this has to be one. And hopefully AEW signs a TV deal that includes streaming and that you can watch old episodes of Dynamite on like a Max or something like that. So that way you can go back. It doesn't have to be saved on a DVR or on YouTube TV or whatever if you have it. That way anybody can go back and watch a match like this, because it is one of those matches that I think deserves to be studied. I think that I enjoyed so much about it, right? I liked, and there are some people being critical of it, but I don't even know if that criticism is coming from a real place. Some of it is, I'm sure, people are free to be critical of stuff, but I really thought, I wasn't bothered at all, I should say, by the lax officiating, by the fact that, table spots or them going into the crowd or count outs or any of that stuff was kind of lax. Because ultimately, if the branding of AEW is, if they're saying this is where the best wrestle, then the referees should allow the best to wrestle there. And if you're having a match like this, then an official in that promotion should be smart enough, aware enough to allow a match to continue. Now, if MJF is doing something blatant, like taking a foreign object like the ring, putting it on his finger and getting ready to punch somebody with that ring on, well, then that's obviously a disqualification. That's a foreign object. That's like, okay, you're begging me to disqualify you. But if within the match, it just finds its way into the crowd, if they're fighting so hard that they're outside the ring, and it's like, why would you, if this were real life, why would you end it in a countdown? The fact that this is storytelling is like, why in a story would you end this in a countdown? Just because, So I thought that it was the right thing to do. We saw Will Ospreay whip out a Styles clash. We saw him whip out the Crossroads, which commentary called Crossroads, which I loved that. And it really made me feel, too, when you saw these moves, I didn't feel like, oh, Ospreay is stealing moves. I thought it was more like a tip of the hat, like a tribute to other people who are the best at wrestling. AJ Styles, Cody Rhodes. I mean, when you're making that list of people who are the best at wrestling, Cody Rhodes, AJ Styles, Will Ospreay, MJF are all now on that list. And I think little moments like that, to me as a fan, connect the world and the world of wrestling and make it all kind of, yeah, this is all one thing. Yeah, we are all aware of everything that's going on. And it's kind of cool that everything is clicking here. I think that it proved a couple of things, right? I think that Will Ospreay is just this incredible, incredible talent. And he's had so many great matches already that even though he's young, he could coast for a while. He doesn't need to keep having these great matches, especially as often as he does in AEW. We just saw him on a pay-per-view having an incredible match with Swerve. I think that it proves that Ospreay is here to like the level that he didn't come this far to get this far. I think that as much as wrestling fans respect Will Ospreay, I think Will Ospreay wants to be a household name in the United States. I think he wants to be looked at as a top-tier American television wrestler. And how's he going to do that? He's not going to change his style, but he's going to go on American television and perform in a way that fans can't help but be drawn to it. Not only cheer for him, but buy a ticket so that they can cheer for him. The second observation I had was that MJF has no business being this good at the wrestling part of wrestling. There's no reason for MJF to be this good at the wrestling part of wrestling. Like, you're already engaged by the promo. You're already engaged by the storytelling. You're already engaged by the way he interacts with the audience. He doesn't need to wrestle at all, and you're there. You don't need to have a favorite MJF match for MJF to be the guy who's the reason you're buying a ticket. But for some reason, this psychopath has it in his head that he wants to be the best wrestler as well. And I mean, it's becoming a more and more difficult argument to argue against. Like, I watch this guy go, like the stuff that he's doing, you don't have to do it. People already are like, you're the man. Did you see this promo? Yeah, the promo is great. You see the hour-long match that MJF had where he's right on par with Will Ospreay. What are you talking about? I mean, you're clearly at a point where to not draw comparisons to Ric Flair is just not being honest anymore. I mean, when I say, talk about guys who became famous for their promo, that became famous for their character, that became famous for these rivalries that were based on these amazing stories that weren't necessarily told inside the wrestling ring. When that happens, you don't have to be a great wrestler. But who's the first other guy? Not the only. Who's the first other guy that you think of when I tell you the promo is what you're famous for, the promo is what draws you in, except he also can go an hour and make it not only the best match of the night, a match that's so good that the match has the industry talking. Who's the other guy that's cutting promos that is making people boo him, but is still going an hour with Ricky Steamboat, with Dory Funk, with Jack Briscoe, with whoever? Ric Flair. I mean, this is 80s Flair that we're looking at with MJF. And I don't know that we've seen that since Flair. I mean, maybe, send me an email, leave a comment on YouTube, send me a tweet, whatever you want to do. Maybe we have. But there's a real direct comparison there. And MJF is doing it in a way that doesn't feel old. He's doing it in a way that relates to what's going on now. I think that both these guys are so in touch with the audience and know their roles so well. I think the reason the audience was so into this match for the full hour was because Will Ospreay is an incredible babyface and MJF is just an incredible heel. MJF is such a good heel that you would think after an hour of having just an excellent wrestling match that the fans would go like, you know what? I know we're supposed to boo you, but we're not going to boo you. The fans wanted a time limit draw. You could see them in the front row and they were looking at the clock going, no, 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 no. But I mean, it was timed perfectly. Hats off to Ospreay, to MJF, to the referee, who with the clock in the shot, that's a risky thing to do. The countdown clock was in frame as the referee was making that cover. MJF hits him with the ringed finger, falls on top of it. Ref has to wake up from his bump. 1, 2, and just as the countdown clock says 0, 0, 2, that third hand comes down, and the bell rings right before the 2 becomes 1, leaving it at officially legit 59:58. Not like an hour and 3 seconds, but we're going to, kind of play with it a little bit. You get what we were going for. At a legit 59:58, according to the clock that was on the screen as it was happening. MJF wins, and the fans are waiting for the announcement. Clearly, they want a draw. And when they announce that not only has MJF won, he's won the international championship, he gets booed. After all that, he still gets booed. He's taken the title off Will Ospreay. He hasn't given you that beautiful, poetic moment of a time limit draw. After being invested for 59 minutes, and at that point, probably about 55 seconds, he's still got to cheat to win. After all that, after almost an hour, after a classic match, that bastard from Long Island, MJF, still has to cheat at 59:55 to win, which is drawn even a greater spotlight is put on that when you realize that Will Ospreay had the opportunity to put the Tiger Driver 91 on him, and he didn't take it because he doesn't want to injure people. That's the story, right? That Will Ospreay has retired the Tiger Driver 91. He knows it's his most effective move, but he won't do it anymore because it's too dangerous. And he had the opportunity to do it to Max, and he probably would have beaten Max if he had done it, and he didn't do it. However, Max did punch him in the face with a foreign object on his fingers. He did not have the same respect for Will Ospreay that Will Ospreay had for MJF. And then you got that beautiful scene with MJF looking so proud of himself with the oxygen mask on his face once again. And we go, yeah, they would need oxygen. I still don't understand the gas that was in that tank, Because you always hear about, the thing about running marathons is you're supposed to run the first, half of it at a snail's pace and then pick up as you go, because otherwise you'll get blown up by the time you get there. I don't know what point in that match they were running at a snail's pace. They somehow got to a point where they both had an hour of conditioning. And these guys aren't doing live events, especially MJF. I don't know what he did to train for that thing. I don't know where he was. Maybe he was a creative pro. I don't know where he was or what he was doing while he was off of AEW, but he's come back and he's come back strong. Clearly, MJF as a heel defends that title against Will Ospreay at All In. I mean, I think that's the only thing that's got to happen. And the one thing that I have to wonder is that what they're going to use? Is that going to be kind of the climax of this Tiger Driver 91 story? Is MJF going to be the one that eats the Tiger Driver 91? Because if so, because there's two ways to do it, right? Either if you're not doing a move like that because you don't want to injure people, then you can do a move like that on somebody like Swerve, and win or lose, you just turned heel because people know what you did. But maybe because it's someone like MJF, and you spend from now until All In convincing people that he deserves it. Convincing people that out of everyone on this roster, that's the guy that deserves Tiger Driver 91. That if you can do that, and you should do that, when you get to Wembley, you can get into a position where he locks in the Tiger Driver, and people start going crazy because they're like, yes, he's finally going to do it, and that's the move that Ospreay beats MJF on. Man, Swerve and Danielson are going to have a lot to follow if something like that happens. All In is sounding like it's going to be a lot of fun. Tony Storm versus Mariah May, the rematch, hopefully, between MJF and Will Ospreay, and Swerve versus Danielson, and who knows what else. Probably Mercedes versus Britt Baker. It's a hell of a show. We had a lot of stuff going on, and I'll get to email. We still got a lot of stuff to talk about. I told you today was going to be a big show. We didn't do any emergency pods. Rhea Ripley. So people came up to me this week, and they said, Sam, we know we're getting Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan at SummerSlam. Is it gonna be a custody match? And I look at these people and I tell them, no. I understand again, I feel like I'm using poetry too much in this podcast this week, but I understand the poetry of it. I understand the symbolic nature, the fact that we're returning to the same event where little 8-year-old Dominic's custody was held up in a ladder, SummerSlam, only to have custody of Dominic once again be put on the line. And it's possible still, right? But I don't see it as quite as viable unless Liv Morgan wins. So the way I see it happening, right? Because the reason why it's a little bit more complicated than that is because Rhea loves Dom. Who doesn't, right? Liv Morgan doesn't actually love Dominic. She only wants Dominic because Rhea wants Dominic. And theoretically, unless you build up Dominic and Rhea Ripley, like if Dominic is willing to put his custody up in the match, then that's enough for Rhea to not want his custody. And if Rhea doesn't want his custody, then Liv Morgan doesn't want his custody either because it won't rub it in for Rhea. And if Rhea and Liv are fighting for something that neither one of them want, I feel like the match might not be as good. But all that said, we get to Raw this week, and there's still a lot of chicanery with Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio, and now Jey Uso's involved. See, for me, I feel like maybe they didn't have this planned, because theoretically you have Rhea Ripley and Damian Priest going together, right? There is something that is so engaging about this idea of Jey Uso trying to holla at Rhea Ripley that I feel like this is where the only direction that we can go in, okay? I think that instead of a custody of Dominic SummerSlam match, I think the idea here is that you have Rhea Ripley versus Liv Morgan. Dominic turns on Rhea and sides with Liv Morgan. Liv Morgan beats Rhea Ripley at SummerSlam. And Dominic Mysterio runs off with Liv Morgan. It's what drives the Judgment Day apart. It drives Rhea Ripley crazy. I think that this builds to a mixed tag team match where now it is Rhea Ripley and Jey Uso versus Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio. I understand if you think it should be Damian Priest. Picture, if you will, Jey Uso's entrance also being done by Rhea Ripley. And while Rhea's doing it, she's got a pair of black sunglasses on. And instead of yeet, Y-E-E-T on them, it says M-A-M-I on them. Jey Uso and Rhea Ripley win this mixed tag. And when Jey Uso is in a tag team, post Usos, just go back to the Cody Rhodes tag team, okay? It's great. Jey and Rhea win the mixed tag, maybe at Bash in Berlin. And then we go on to Bad Blood. And with all this interference, with all the Jey Uso, with all the Dominic Mysterio, with all the Judgment Day, with all this stuff going on, what's the one way that Rhea Ripley can be sure that she gets a fair shot at the Women's World Championship and Liv Morgan? Hell in a Cell. Wrap 2 tons of steel around those two women. Because if you play this out the right way and Liv Morgan is still the champion, you're going to have people desperately wanting to see Liv and Rhea inside the Hell in a Cell. And Rhea standing tall at the end of that match, I think would be incredible. I will say this. If Rhea Ripley loses to Liv Morgan at SummerSlam and Dominic Mysterio turns on Rhea and sticks with Liv, you better have a Roman Reigns return up your sleeve, because the fans are going to be so mad at you. There is going to be so much heat that I don't know if we'll be able to cope. But that's where I think I see it going. I think I see no custody of Dom at SummerSlam. I see Dom helping Liv. And it takes us down this road where now Jey Uso is even more involved because, how do you not want Jey Uso involved, especially after what happened on Raw? I want to talk about one more thing from SmackDown, which was the contract signing between Logan Paul and LA Knight. I mean, shout out to Logan Paul, by the way, who is appears to be really clinging on to being a Gen Zer with those pants that he wore. He's going to be 30 next year. It might be rough. But I will say this. He's always good, right? I mean, that's the story of Logan Paul. So good so much better in the ring than anybody expected. But also on the microphone. The fact that he showed up as a babyface left people so confused because the minute he was allowed to just be a villain, he was fantastic. I feel like now he's even more deadly on that microphone because not only is he naturally good at being a villain, but he's grown confident in himself. You can see it. You can feel it. He gets this now. He gets the art form. He gets being a professional wrestler. He gets being a villain. He gets which buttons to push and how to push them, how to not only accentuate the things that people like about your opponent, but also accentuate the things that people dislike about you. And that's where the money of the match is. When he's sitting there talking about how he doesn't need to win this match. He doesn't even need to have this match because he's got so much other stuff going on. And how it's pathetic. That's what he was basically inferring. That LA Knight really does need this United States Championship match. What he's saying is it's a dog whistle, you know. What he's saying to fans is, yeah, I mean, if you really love professional wrestling, I guess cheer for LA Knight. But if you like somebody who's only 1 foot in, 1 foot out, I'm your guy. How do you not cheer for LA Knight in that scenario? Logan Paul made LA Knight look like $1 million in his promo. I respected that Logan Paul promo a lot. But I also thought that LA Knight's performance was pretty fantastic. LA Knight is coming with this level of intensity because obviously Logan Paul brought it up too. The comparisons to The Rock, the amount of catchphrases being used, all the criticisms that everybody has against LA Knight. It's really good that we're confronting them head on. You know, I think that LA Knight showed some real intensity. It didn't feel like a character with LA Knight and Logan Paul in the ring. LA Knight felt like a real human being that hated this person that he was staring at. You know, that was ready to take that title. LA Knight looked like the guy that was ready to beat Logan Paul. And, I mean, you know, I guess the story is LA Knight hasn't had that career-making moment. But in reality, this whole year, I think, is LA Knight's career-making moment. I think that you know, you go back to last year's SummerSlam, and LA Knight wins the Slim Jim Battle Royal. And, you know, winning a Battle Royal is not a career maker. There's never been somebody, unless you win the Royal Rumble, like Yokozuna, it was kind of a career maker winning the Royal Rumble. But realistically, you know, there aren't many Battle Royals, and especially non-Royal Rumble Battle Royals, that winning them are career makers. However, it did set things in motion, and it let the audience know we're confident in this guy because you have SummerSlam, which he wins the Slim Jim Battle Royal, and he becomes the spokesperson for Slim Jim, which I believe WWE would not allow him to do if they weren't confident in his ability to be that guy. Then in the fall, John Cena comes back, and who does he team with? LA Knight. It's not a matter of trying to get a heel over by allowing him to, you know, beat the crap out of John Cena, although they did it at the very end with Solo. Instead, they had babyface John Cena show up and go, yep, this is the guy I want to be associated with, LA Knight. And LA Knight gets that Cena rub, which leads him to November. And main eventing a Saudi pay-per-view with Roman Reigns. That's a big deal. He didn't beat Roman Reigns. Nobody beat Roman Reigns. But LA Knight is on that list of Roman Reigns challengers. And Roman Reigns, especially towards the end, didn't wrestle all that often. So the list of people, especially that challenged him one-on-one, is really not that long. And when you get towards the bottom of that list and you're on it, that's a big mark. He becomes part of the Fatal 4-Way at the main event of or at the championship match for the Royal Rumble. That he's not even in the Royal Rumble match because he's in that Fatal 4-Way match. And then, you know, it kind of continues from there, but he's elevated, right? To the point where even at WrestleMania, people were ready for Logan Paul versus LA Knight, and they went in a different direction, obviously, but we get there now, and I feel like LA Knight potentially beating Logan Paul becomes this moment for LA Knight. And it's interesting because the top tier of the babyface section of the roster of WWE has become more crowded than it's been in many years. It's real tough for somebody like LA Knight to stick out at this point, just because there's so many people. You're talking about a babyface roster that includes Randy Orton and Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes, and I would argue Damian Priest and Seth Rollins and CM Punk, and plus guys coming in. You know, Roman Reigns is on his way back as a babyface. It's tough right now. Sami Zayn. But LA Knight continues to take these moments and remind people, this is why I got your attention to begin with. And I think even people that weren't necessarily thinking about LA Knight as much as they used to, I think that contract signing, at least for me, it changed things. It made me go, whoa, that's right. We're not on to something here. We've been on to something. And that's LA Knight. Yeah. Another guy that's getting a lot of attention is Joe Hendry, because I believe in Joe Hendry. One of the first names that we brought up when Jordan Grace first showed up in NXT, one of the first names brought up here on Notsam Wrestling was Joe Hendry, and those signs started popping up, and more people started asking about Joe Hendry. Pops up in the NXT Battle Royal, and now he's a bigger part of NXT. I love the only criticism that I had when Joe Hendry first showed up in NXT was when he did his entrance on that show that he did the Battle Royal for. When he does that turn and looks at the camera and smiles, it was short, too short. He's lengthened it. Last couple times he showed up on NXT, we've had a nice long shot of Joe Hendry giving that weird smile to the camera. Because the song and that weird smile to the camera and the way he claps with the sideways and the cupping of the hands, everything is important. Because it's all so strange, is everything, right? It's all so important with Joe Hendry. So we had Slammiversary, TNA Slammiversary on Saturday over the weekend. And lots of stuff going down. Of course, Jordan Grace retaining over Ash by Elegance, the former Dana Brooke. You had Speedball Mike Bailey defeating Mustafa Ali. I believe Mustafa Ali, maybe his first loss since leaving WWE. I guess Earl Hebner was supposed to help Ali win. He did not help Ali win. He did not screw over Speedball Mike Bailey. They were in Canada, so that would have been quite a tragedy. Lots of stuff. New TNA Tag Team Champions, Chris Bay. We had the Rascals, which include, of course, Wes Lee from NXT, beating the No Quarter Catch Crew with, Charlie Dempsey and all of them, which, again, amazing NXT representation. But the main event was a 6-way elimination match. It was, Gauntlet maybe is what it was, technically. I don't know. It was Moose, obviously, defending against Joe Hendry, Frankie Kazarian, Nick Nemeth, the former Dolph Ziggler, Josh Alexander, the walking weapon, and Steve Maclin. And Moose starts it out. He beats Steve Maclin. Then comes Joe Hendry. Everybody loses their minds. The show is sold out. It's the biggest TNA crowd in years, actually. And Joe Hendry pins the world champion. Joe Hendry pins Moose. And I think a lot of people, myself included, walked into this hoping to see Joe Hendry win the championship. And as it turns out, he did not win the TNA championship, as Josh Alexander beat Joe Hendry and got himself some heat for it. Of course, this builds the heel persona of Josh Alexander, but we end up going all the way to the end with Nick Nemeth winning the TNA championship, the world championship. And, this is a very delicate situation, I think, because in almost every scenario, I would say that's the exact right move. Nick Nemeth, after all the years that he spent as Dolph Ziggler, getting out there and getting to showcase what he's capable of, getting out there and getting to showcase how good he is this long into his career, he should be the world champion. He could be the world champion of multiple organizations if he wanted to, and should be. But in this moment, I question the logic greatly of not putting the world title on Joe Hendry. I get using all the goodwill Joe Hendry has to build this heel in Josh Alexander. And I'm sure it'll build to a match at the next pay-per-view where Joe Hendry beats Josh Alexander, and that match will be huge because of how big Joe Hendry has gotten because of the internet, because of TNA, and because of NXT. But, I mean, you watch SmackDown, and there's Joe Hendry signs. But to me, I just feel like if Joe Hendry were the TNA champion, then when that guy shows up to NXT and gets a major spotlight put on him, you know how you know Joe Hendry is big? Because Booker T is pretending he's mad at Joe Hendry now. Remember when, and people are reporting on it, remember when Booker T pretended he had heat with Corey Graves, then he pretended he had heat with CM Punk, now he's pretending he has heat with Joe Hendry. That's how you know how big Joe Hendry is. I don't understand not making him your world champion. If you're going to have one of your superstars guaranteed to make a huge, for lack of a better term, impact on NXT, which is a WWE brand, which is white hot right now, and the ratings keep going up for. They're going to be on the CW in a couple of months. Why would you not want to put as much attention on your brand as possible? Because if Joe Hendry, as a TNA star, is on NXT, I think a lot of people are recognizing him as a TNA star, but there's also a lot of people going, I mean, I guess he's in TNA now, but surely he'll be in NXT soon. If he shows up as the TNA champion, I truly feel, number one, it locks him into that TNA brand. Number two, every time he's got that title on, your logo is on the screen. The TNA logo is on the screen every time he's there and he's holding the title. And number three, it makes people go, that's the TNA champion, Joe Hendry. Not, he's in TNA, but I guess he's coming to NXT, that's Joe Hendry. Whether he's coming to NXT or not, by the way, I have no idea. I just mean like perception. And I know maybe you're like, well, if he's going to lose to NXT guys, he probably shouldn't be the champion. I don't agree with that. I mean, I don't think that Jordan Grace lost anything by losing to the NXT champion, you know? If anything, it made Jordan Grace look bigger. I think that these champions being the ones that get big matches on NXT, if Joe Hendry's going to get a big match, makes the champion come across as a bigger star. And you don't have to do it long. You know, it's not like you could even, I mean, hopefully they're going to build to even if it's just the Great American Bash. But what I guess the next pay-per-view is beginning of September, I want to say. There's a September NXT pay-per-view, right? Keep the title on Joe Hendry for a couple of months. And then have him lose the title to Nick Nemeth. Because Nick Nemeth should be your champion. It's of course he should. But I would think while he's hot, strike while the iron's hot, put the title on Joe Hendry, have him go on NXT television with your title on, have him fight on an NXT PLE with your title on, and then when there's as much interest as possible in this guy, then have people watch your show to either have Josh Alexander take the title from him and then Josh loses it to Nick Nemeth, or have Nick Nemeth just stay a babyface and do babyface, Joe Hendry versus Nemeth, and Nick Nemeth still wins. However you want to do it, you can still get to where you're going and take advantage of what's going on, but maybe there's more to it than I know. You know, I'm fully willing to admit that when it comes to other people's businesses, that they may know best. It's just as a fan, that's kind of how I see it when speaking of other people's businesses. How about you talk about what Nick Nemeth is doing since leaving the WWE and becoming the TNA World Champion? Well, there are more, and Mustafa Ali, there are more free agents that are becoming available, and one of them is the Maharaja, formerly known as Jinder Mahal, Raj Desi, who is, or Desi, who's, the Maharaja, showed up in Game Changer Wrestling, GCW. Yes, they ran a couple of shows this weekend, which were on Triller TV. On the Friday night show, a group of masked assailants came in and attacked some of GCW's most beloved superstars. And Raj unmasked to show that the Maharaja had come to GCW, and people could not believe it. He then showed up on Saturday, and at Saturday, they advertised, we're going to hear from him, so I tuned in to watch. And he came to the ring. He attacked more members of the GCW roster. General Manager Matt Cardona came out to say, who gave you the power to think you could just be here and do this? Oh, that's right, I did. Matt Cardona takes credit for bringing the former Jinder Mahal into Game Changer Wrestling, but Raj, the Maharaja, makes it very clear that he doesn't care about Matt Cardona either. He says he's the most selfish person in this industry, is what the Maharaja said. And they're building, which, I mean, GCW is at its best. And sometimes they get off track from it, and it drives me a little crazy because they've done such a good job of building homegrown characters, which honestly, I don't know that I've seen it done as well since ECW. When ECW had this roster of Tommy Dreamer and Sabu and the Sandman and Taz and all these, the Dudley Boys, and all these guys that were ECW talents that felt like they were born and bred there. GCW, Game Changer Wrestling, is doing the same thing with guys like Nick Gage, guys like Effie, guys like Joey Janela. I mean, there's so many, right? Allie. I think that when you involve them in stories, it becomes compelling very, very quickly, especially when you involve them in stories with people you wouldn't expect to be at this Outlaw Mud show, GCW. And of course, the Maharaja goes out there and he insults the venues that they're in. He thinks this is the first time I'm even seeing indie wrestling. It sucks. All this stuff. I'm going to elevate it. And they don't, indie wrestling fans don't want to be elevated. They like the show. So it makes for a perfect heel. And they're building a story between the Maharaja and Effie. And I love that it's happening. I love that for Effie. I love it for GCW. I love it for Raj. Whenever people, when one door shuts and they realize that it's an opportunity to showcase what they can do elsewhere, I think it's a great thing. And that's when wrestling is at its best. I'm sure WWE loves it when people do that because they're like, okay, he's even more valuable than he was when he was here. Maybe we'll bring him back. Or maybe it's just something that's going to fuel the industry and make everything healthier. By the way, I saw a couple of social media posts, people noticing that when Raj showed up in GCW, if you looked right by his feet, there was indeed a Not Sam logo on the mat. I'm the Logan Paul of GCW in the sense that I get that Not Sam logo on the wrestling mat. Yes. And if you go back and watch GCW, if you get the monthly Triller subscription or whatever, and you go back and watch all the GCW shows, for the last couple years, I would think the majority, a lot of them, have had Not Sam logos on the ring mat, which is ironic because a lot of people will call me a WWE shill, and those same people will probably tell you that they support indie wrestling. I would argue that very much silently, I've been supporting indie wrestling for a long time, and when I have the opportunity to do so, I do it through legitimate sponsorships. There's a Not Sam logo on all these ring mats. That's because I think GCW and it's only because I think GCW is awesome, because I want to contribute to the growth of that company, and honestly, I want my logo associated with that right now. I mean, if the product goes, insane, I'd go, hey, take my logo off the mat. But right now, I'm a GCW fan. And the fact that I can help the company and make it that public, I like that. So that's the explanation behind that. Interesting thing on SmackDown, you see Tiffany Stratton's briefcase get broken. Wonder what they're going to do there. I wonder if they're going to be able to fix it. You know the rule here on Not Sam Wrestling. You want to contribute, you can contribute. Of course, you can help us very much by making sure you're subscribed across all platforms, audio and video. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're everywhere. You can leave a rating and a review on your audio podcast platforms. Also subscribe to the YouTube channel where the podcast goes up in full every single week. Leave comments, hit like, tell your friends about it, subscribe to the channel, do the whole thing. We got some fun stuff coming up. If you're into action figures, wrestling action figures, Zombie Sailor, who does the Heels and Faces line of action figures, he's going to be here later this week for an interview talking about what he's got lined up, his Comic-Con exclusives and Series 3 and all the amazing wrestling figures that he's got coming out. So I'm going to, this is the third time we've had him on. We have him on once a year or so. So if you're into that, check that out. If not, whatever. But yeah, enjoy. If you want to contribute to the show, email notsamwrestling@gmail.com. The email address is notsamwrestling@gmail.com. I honestly can't believe that there are still people that ask what the email address is, because I say it at the beginning of every email segment. And I guess it'd be one thing if you didn't listen to the email segment. But if you didn't listen to the email segment, how would you even know you could email? Something like when people are like, hey, what's the email? The email into the show? I guess that they're not going to be great emails. NotSamWrestling@gmail.com is our email address. Maybe we'll get some real good ones. NotSamWrestling@gmail.com. This is coming from the big homie, Avik. Avik writes, hey, Sam, if this makes air. By the way, he forwarded this email no fewer than 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Honestly makes me want to not allow it to make it to air, but Avik, you're a real one, so I'm going to allow it. If this makes air, I'll be on a 7-hour coach trip back to London, so it will make my day, but I did buy your merch. Oh, thank you. Everybody that contributed to the merch sale, it's closed, but I appreciate you guys. Just a quick one this week. Which match that has been officially announced should main event SummerSlam? Cody Solo, only if Roman returns, in my opinion. If not, Damian Gunther. We know Gunther will be a big deal if he gets the title. I don't think Damian Gunther will main event the show. And he's a heel. So the idea of a heel winning in the main event, I don't think in any scenario that should main event the show. I kind of think Roman's going to... I think the match is announced. It should be Cody versus Solo, regardless of what the plan is. Right now, Cody versus Solo. The only thing that would even make me consider something else would be if they announce they're doing Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk. As I've been saying, that feud has gotten so hot, you could argue it should main event any PLE that it's on. So that's kind of the only one, but the Bloodline is on the poster. Floyd writes in, ahoy, Sam. Watching both Drew McIntyre and Hangman Adam Page, I see a similarity in their stories which caused organic heel turns. We've seen the peak of Drew's darkness following the Scotland screw job, and Hangman's turn was caused by a home invasion angle involving Swerve Strickland, two very personal, antagonistic acts that have given birth to very unhinged versions of each character. One could argue that Drew's heel turn paid off at WrestleMania, but in Hangman's case, how would you pay off his turn? Should he be the one to dethrone Swerve? No, I don't think Hangman should be the one to dethrone Swerve. I don't know. I mean, I think that Drew's... First of all, if you say that Drew's darkness following the Scotland screw job, WrestleMania was before that. So you're saying that it paid off before the peak of the story. Clearly, WrestleMania wasn't a payoff. He won the title and then got screwed harder. So I don't know why you think that was the payoff. Like, unless the only way things pay off is if they win a title. Because that would be, I don't know. No, I think Hangman's story is also not even close to at its peak, I don't think. So, and there's been so many, like, kind of wishy-washy turn one way or the other. I feel like Hangman's turn may start pushing more towards this storyline with the Elite and where he stands with the Elite, but we'll probably get more of a clearer vision of that at Blood and Guts. Brandon writes in, Sam, big fan, quick question. How would you feel about WWE bringing the updated Fiend concept that was shown at the end of Bray's documentary into the Wyatt 6 storyline? Maybe someone like Braun Strowman could don the mask, or perhaps someone completely new. Thanks for all your hard work. Have a good one. I appreciate the email. I mean, on paper, I don't love the idea. That said, I was questionable on them bringing back Uncle Howdy without Bray Wyatt. So is there a narrative that could justify it? Sure. You know, I'm not... You would have to sell me on the narrative that would justify it before you sold me on who or if. You see what I'm saying? Like, figure out a narrative that would allow me to be on board with that before you ask me, number one, should they do it? Number two, who should do it? How is the most important question for me. Spencer writes in, with the Raw debut on Netflix coming up in January and WWE pulling out a lot of big guns, what could you see as a good location for this show? MSG-like venue, or could it be suitable for a stadium-like show? Keep up the great content. Can't wait for Mania 41. He's in Vegas. I get that. I feel like Los Angeles would probably be the right... Although they're talking about... I guess there are rumors that Survivor Series might be in Los Angeles. I don't know if that's true or false, but I feel like doing the show in LA would be the way to go because you'd want as many celebrities there as possible. You know, you'd want to feel like there's a lot happening there. You'd want Netflix executives to come in for it. Seems like a Los Angeles arena would be the spot for it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's gonna be a lot of wild speculation. Rule number 2 about the Netflix debut, and I think as we get closer, we'll probably be able. Once we get out of the summer, I think we'll be able to start talking about that a little bit more seriously. Sarah writes in, hope you're doing well. I'm doing incredibly. I'm the GOAT. Do you think Tiffany causes a distraction to help Nia win and then cashes in on her? Or do you think she helps Nia and they become a power duo, leading to an eventual Tiffany cash in at some point on Nia? I think Nia Jax wins. I don't know if Tiffany helps her, but I think Nia Jax wins. I do not think Tiffany cashes in, although I think Nia wins. And for, a little while, we play with the unease of Tiffany having the briefcase and Nia, does she trust her? Doesn't she trust her? That's where I think that goes. Let's see. Andrew writes in, I personally don't like the concept of characters on a show watching that show to gain information they would have known. The beauty of the Batista Evolution angle was that we knew something that Evolution didn't. I know that you're a fan of smart characters watching the product, and was just wondering if there are any rules we should abide by. Well, there are 3 rules. Number 1, watch the product. Number 2, speculate wildly. And number 3, everything counts. I.e., should we expect that Rhea sees all of Dom's on-screen interactions, Priest telling Dom that Rhea's Dom's girl, etc.? Tried workshopping this for brevity. Well, you did great, Andrew. Nice brief email. That was fantastic. I think, we should expect that Rhea could have seen Dom's interactions. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong with the idea of them, watching the show. I think it makes things count more. Priest telling Dom that Rhea's Dom's girl. I mean, the idea that Damian Priest is being a smartass and egging Dom on, like, he's not doing heel stuff. He's not doing stuff to continue on with an angle. But, he's just being a smartass. And the idea that, like, Rhea, I think that being responsible enough as storytellers that Rhea Ripley could be watching Raw makes you have to do things in a smarter way. You can't have Dom go on TV and say, don't tell Rhea about this. You have to maybe do something in the background like you did. You have to let stories play out a little differently. You have to let people like us speculate wildly on what may be happening off screen. I think that the Dominic Liv Morgan story has been told more than effectively in a way that allows Rhea Ripley's character to have been watching the TV the whole time. So I think that's what I'm a fan of, is figuring out a way to tell stories in an intelligent way that allows us to know what's going on, but also allows us to believe that people could be watching the show. Christian writes in, my podcast tribal chief, many blessings to you and your family, my friend. My family appreciates it. Thank you. And thank you for acknowledging me. Hearing that you watch with your family sometimes inspired me to try and build a common interest in wrestling with my stepson, and has now become a fan at the age of 10. Thank you, Sam. Perfect. I love to hear that. That's incredible. Enjoy it. My question for you today is, do you believe in Joe Hendry? Rap with me on if you see Hendry as the fastest rising and most currently trending superstar. Let's relax. He's very clearly over, and in his most recent NXT appearance had the crowd in the palm of his hand. Even more. No, look. if we watch the product, we understand what's going on. Things get hot. Gimmicks get hot. Angles get hot. Hendry got hot. It's not like this thing that's never happened in the industry before. He's not the fastest rising and most currently trending superstar. He literally, LA Knight got bigger than this, quicker than this, when LA Knight got real big, real fast. You know what I mean? And that's not to take anything away from Joe Hendry. All of this counts. This is awesome. But it's not unprecedented, and it's great. And that's great news, by the way. The fact that it's not unprecedented is a good thing, because generally speaking, this stuff works out pretty well for the superstars involved. What do you see in the future for this guy? Clearly a crowd pleaser and the perfect example of goofy done right. I agree. Does he inevitably end up in WWE one day? He is in WWE. You know what I mean? He's on NXT. Could he sign a contract with them? Yeah, why not? If he's still this big or even close to this big when his TNA deal's up, of course WWE would sign him. I think a Rumble appearance may generate one of the biggest pops of the coming year. No. Again, we have to deal in reality here. We have to be human beings, okay? We have to have a little bit of intelligence, okay? Joe Hendry will get a big pop at the Royal Rumble. Roman Reigns returning, be it at SummerSlam or anywhere else. Roman Reigns music hitting as a surprise. That's a pop of the year. That is what you're talking about. Don't say things like a Royal Rumble appearance may generate one of the biggest pops of the year. No. The Rock might generate one of the biggest pops of the year. John Cena. You're saying 2025. That's the Royal Rumble you're talking about. John Cena's retirement year. John Cena's going on a retirement tour. I don't think Joe Hendry's Royal Rumble pop would be the biggest pop of the year. I think it would be a great pop. If we don't qualify things, we don't have to have these conversations. Just say it would be a massive pop, and it would be. Because I'm not the type of person to go, yeah, it might be massive, but it wouldn't be as big as. Well, you didn't say it would be as big as. That's a negative thing to do. But to qualify it with one of the biggest pops of the coming year, top 20, sure. And I believe in Joe Hendry, but you're making me say things like this by, exaggerating in these emails. Oliver writes in, hello to my tribal chief of wrestling podcasting. Thank you for the acknowledgement. I know you love to roast emails. No, I respond honestly. If you write a good email and you have good ideas, I don't just trash them. Find me one email that I'm not doing like a gimmick. You know what I mean? This isn't like, ooh, now I get to roast emails. That's lame. That's cornball nonsense. You don't listen or watch this podcast for cornball stuff. I have integrity. I speak from the heart. I speak with honesty. If somebody came to me and said, why are you such an a-hole to that Joe Hendry email? I'd go like, come on. You read the email. Come on. If he had just said, I think Joe Hendry's awesome, and I go, that's a dumb email, then it's like, Sam, like, you're trying too hard. What are you trying to sell shirts? What are you trying to get a catchphrase over? What are you doing? So I don't love to roast emails. I love to respond to emails in an honest fashion. Maybe that's going out of style. I don't know. He writes, I know you love to roast emails, but I think I have something that you're going to find pretty cool. Pretty cool. That's still, even with there you are. Pretty cool, there you are, and right. Those are my top 3 of the year so far. Right. I remember a few weeks back on the pod, someone sent in a Mount Rushmore and you lit them up. We're explaining how a Mount Rushmore isn't a top 4, but 4 people who represent each president on Mount Rushmore. Okay. Therefore, I have carefully constructed a proper Mount Rushmore, and I want to know if you agree on it or what you would change. You're pushing me. You're testing. You're testing. For the sake of this list, I'm not going to include guys from the 40s and 50s, such as Luthez. My 4, Andre the Giant, a.k.a. George Washington, for the birth of the nation. Okay. Hulk Hogan, a.k.a. Thomas Jefferson, for the expansion of the nation. Okay. Stone Cold, a.k.a. Lincoln, for preserving the nation. Okay. I love this. John Cena, a.k.a. Teddy Roosevelt, for development of the nation. Pretty good, right? Honestly, Oliver, it's one of the best goddamn Mount Rushmores I've ever read, if I'm being totally honest with you. It's a fantastic Mount Rushmore. Let me know your thoughts and any changes. I do have some. I would say, and this could change, but I'm going to call it sports entertainment. Like this, what we now know is wrestling. And I'm going to put Hulk Hogan in the birth spot. I'm going to give Hulk Hogan George Washington spot because Hulk Hogan is the one that took it to what it is today. I'm going to put Stone Cold Steve Austin in the expansion slot. Stone Cold did not preserve the nation. That's not what he did. He expanded it. Stone Cold Steve Austin brought wrestling to levels it had never seen before and hasn't seen since, depending on how you look at it. So I've got Hogan in the birth, Stone Cold as the expansion. John Cena is actually preserving the nation, right? Because wrestling didn't grow under John Cena, but he kept it alive. So John Cena 100% gets the Lincoln spot. And then Teddy Roosevelt, the development of the nation. You'd have to look at WWE today and how it's developed into this like behemoth, this force, the likes of which we haven't seen before in this industry. And for that, I got to put Roman Reigns there. You could argue that Cody should get that spot, but I got to put my tribal chief up there. I'm going Hogan, Austin, Cena, Roman, based on those specific categories. Don't be sending Mount Rushmores here thinking you could just do this. I don't mind this one, Oliver, but what I don't want it to do is to start a trend, a more dumb Mount Rushmore list, because when you don't do it right, they're an all-time stupid thing. All time. Let's go to Kevin. Sam, you are my wrestling and radio tribal chief. I acknowledge you. I appreciate that. Cancer survivor here. I'm glad you survived it, specifically because of this email and because you seem like a good guy. And I'm happy for your family. Thanks for getting me through the tough times, through the years. Okay, I'd love to be smart-ass Sam. It means a lot that you say that. I really appreciate you saying that. Do you think the Bloodline has been taking out each of Cody's allies until he literally has no one to have his back at SummerSlam, leading the return of Roman Reigns, who will aid Cody? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. Everything counts, as you say. When you put it like that, it does feel like, especially if they literally say you've got no one left, then Roman could help Cody, and that would be good. I still prefer Cody doing it on his own and Roman coming out at the end, but it's not a bad thought, Kevin. It's a good thought because it's a good thought. Nicholas writes in, "Hi, boss. First, I want to wish you and your family a great summer. We're having the best summer ever. I love the SummerSlam poster with Solo just hanging out on the passenger side of his best friend ride, trying to holler at me. Yeah, and the thing about it is the Bloodline has been in a position for a long time where they don't want any scrubs whatsoever. And they see these people, and a lot of, they didn't want Sami Zayn in the Bloodline at first because they thought he was a guy that thought he was fly, but was also known as a busta. Always talking about what he wants, but in reality, he just sits on his broke ass. It turned out Sami Zayn was a lot more than that, but at first, that's why. So I do like that poster as well. More seriously, I think Jacob Fatu must have a one-on-one match and win at SummerSlam. At first, I thought Randy Orton, but now I think Kevin Owens is the perfect candidate for that. What do you think? Have a nice summer, Sam. That's a fun one you did there, Nicholas. I think Randy and Kevin Owens might be off TV even at SummerSlam. And maybe not, but I would probably keep them off. I don't think Jacob Fatu needs a one-on-one. Well, the Bloodline is in the gauntlet match next week on SmackDown, but it's the Tongans. Because we could go to SummerSlam with the Tongans fighting for the Tag Team Championship and Solo fighting for the World Championship, or the WWE Championship. So I think you're going to have the Bloodline facing DIY, especially because Tommaso on SmackDown Lowdown cut a promo and specifically called out the Bloodline. So I feel like Bloodline versus DIY might happen. And I think you're going to get Solo versus Cody. So I think the idea of Jacob helping the Tongans win the Tag Team Championship would get us to a place where we think he might also help Solo win the WWE Championship. That's probably what I would do with Jacob. All right, last email for today. Hey, Sam, my question for today is, how would you like to see John Cena get his next title shot? Royal Rumble, Elimination Chamber, Money in the Bank? Maybe out of those, if he did it out of those three, maybe Money in the Bank, because Money in the Bank would be his last shot potentially, right? Maybe one of the champions says, I'll never give you a shot, and he loses a Royal Rumble and he loses an Elimination Chamber, and he's got to win Money in the Bank. But then people might not like that it takes it away from somebody. He doesn't have to win one of those, but if you were going to win one of those three, I guess I would give him the briefcase. I didn't love that insight, so I'll give you one more email. This is way too long. That's not going to make it. Okay, this is a good one. Cruz writes in, first and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge, I'm glad I went with this one, my podcast tribal chief. I appreciate the acknowledgement. I was a lapsed fan up until the Royal Rumble this year, and your podcast has been an amazing way to dive back into the product. I really appreciate that. I love that. I have a suggestion, fantasy for Cena's last match, or at least how he drops the world title. He eventually wins. I think having a dream match where R-Truth gets to face and beat his childhood hero for his first WWE world title would be amazing. Orton, Punk, Miz, and others would be a good fit, but I love the idea of Truth come on, dude. R-Truth doing something with Cena would be fun. R-Truth is not getting John Cena's last match, and he's not winning the world title from John Cena, okay? I know it's only been 7-8 months. He's not winning the world, especially in this era. There was a time, so here's Cruz. I would go back in time, right? And use Peacock, whatever you want to do. Because there was a time, there's this era. It's called the Attitude Era. And, and that's when they would hotshot titles like crazy. If you want to see titles get hotshot, go watch it like late episodes of Nitro. I can't even keep up with who won this WCW title. They were flopping it around so much. But that's not the era that we're in right now. It's not going to R-Truth. People are going to be mad about that. So I'm going to this is the last question. Hey, Sam, it's Kelly here. Is Brock Lesnar going to come back for SummerSlam? It would be great if Paul Heyman comes back in tow with Brock Lesnar and Jimmy Uso and Roman Reigns as part of the old bloodline against the new bloodline. Man, can you imagine if Brock were to join the new bloodline? No, I think that would probably be too much right now. I think it'll be Roman that comes back at SummerSlam, not Brock. But, I mean, isn't it fun? Here's what's fun. This is fun. There are just so many possibilities that we can actually have conversations like this. That wrestling has opened up in such an insane way and continues to open up in such insane ways that we can actually legitimately have that conversation. And who knows? As I was saying it, I was like, no. And then I thought of it, what it would look like if it actually happened. And the fact that it's not impossible, it is the best time to be a wrestling fan. I hope you've enjoyed today's show. It was a marathon, but there were no emergency podcasts this week. So this is the world that we're in. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're watching and or listening to the podcast. See you in Cleveland. Get your tickets at notsam.com August 1st. And we'll see you again real soon. Thanks, everybody.